Hi again, everyone. This is the Chad Harberts Show on the Sports Guys Iowa Network. So glad to have you back, where we talk high school sports in Iowa as much as we can, as long as we can, because I could talk high school sports all day. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but if you love high school sports like I do, this is the place to be, because we're talking to the coaches, we're talking with the athletes, we're talking with the administrators, and this show is no different. The spring sports season's underway, and we'll get to track and we'll get to golf and tennis and all those things in the upcoming weeks. But as we're kind of ramping up and we're dealing with the weather today, it's rainy outside all across Iowa. I wanted to reach out to a longtime friend of mine who really has his finger on the pulse of the high school sports scene in the state of Iowa. Jason Eslinger is a guy I grew up with here in Grundy Center. He was a year behind me in high school. We've been friends since we were little kids. We've had similar paths professionally, but for the past 3 decades, he's been at the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union, the association that runs all girls sports in this state. He's the associate director. He does a tremendous job, and the Girls Union does a tremendous job of promoting girls sports all across Iowa. They really do a great job with the championships, whether it's basketball down in Des Moines, or it's wrestling or volleyball in Coralville, Cedar Rapids, whether it's softball up in Fort Dodge, that great complex. The Girls Union has really been doing some tremendous stuff. They've been doing it for almost a century, and it's great, a great time for me to talk with my old friend S and just find out what's going on with the Girls Union, find out what he's doing professionally, and let him talk about the great things that are going on behind the scenes in high school sports. So I'm very excited to talk with Jason Eslinger, and I hope you are too. Happy to be joined now by the longtime associate director of the Girls Union, Jason Eslinger, also longtime friend of mine. How you doing, S?
I'm doing great, Chad. Thanks for having me.
I've known you for a while, but it's always a little peculiar when I think about how similar our backgrounds are. And I know I've brought this up to you, but your dad and my late mother graduated together at Rhinebeck High School back in the early 60s.
Class of 62.
62. We both worked in the newspaper business. We both worked in the sports information business. We worked at same papers at some points in our life, and we're just a year apart growing up. So our backgrounds have gone very similar up until, I guess, you got to the Union and I went crazy, went off to Kansas City, went off to Las Vegas. But we're back together again in Iowa, and it's good to be able to hang out with you sometimes during the year.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you're back too. It's great having you back, Chad. You're doing an awesome job at the Courier. I'll tell you that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You've been at the Girls Union a long time now. How long?
I started, my first day was May 17th, 1997. So I will start my 30th year working here in May. So it's been a long journey, but it's been a fun journey. And I haven't really looked for jobs since I've been here.
And people that don't know you, you're the guy behind the curtain with a lot of sports. You're a guy that's involved in all the championships, involved in a lot of the record keeping. You wear a lot of hats at the Girls Union.
Yep. I would say when I was hired in 97, my primary role was to be a backup in the sports information office. For those that have been around for a long time, remember Mike Henderson, who was the longtime photo memory, and he was the computer before the computer statistician and information director for the Girls Union. I was his assistant, and I was in charge of publications. And like you said, I have an SID background. I was working at Drake, and the athletic union and Drake SID office at that time did a lot of things together, and that's what got me into my position. And then it's just evolved since then. Still do some of the sports information work. Obviously, when Mike Henderson passed away in 2005, I took over that role. Then I've eventually picked up some sports in between. And then there's, of course, the website integration, the social media that goes with that, which I don't really have a whole lot to do with anymore, but I still do the PR side of things in regards to, I do all of our rankings and our record books, but then I also manage three sports, swimming, bowling, and softball. Yeah, I've worn a lot of hats, and like I said, I'm not bored very often, and that's what makes this job so fun.
And Iowa, a very unique state in separate boys and girls associations. Is it the only one?
Only one. Yes, we are
the
the Lone Ranger. Yep.
Because I remember when we were in sports information, there was a few D1 schools that had separate like athletic departments.
Right.
Those were very few. So the only state with two separate associations, and famously the girls' union, I guess, broke loose from the boys' union, or started because the boys weren't recognizing the growing sport of girls basketball.
They were told at the time that this was back in the mid 20s that it was not healthy for girls to take part in sports. It was going to hurt them as far as different things and health wise. And so the Boys Association, or the IHSAA, was following the directive of the NFHS, which is the national governing body, and said that we're not going to sponsor girls sports anymore. And there were some angry superintendents that got together at Des Moines Church and said, we're going to start our own group if you're not going to let us play. And that's how we got started, in a back room of a church in Des Moines.
And what's unique is Iowa has never been thought of as the most progressive state in the country. It has its moments, but at the same time, when Title IX becomes law in 70, the girls' union is so far ahead of the game. It's crazy.
It's true that we actually were, the Sports Illustrated did a series of articles on equity in sports. And this was right when Title IX had passed. And there was actually one of the stories in that 3-part series was about the model. They had basically telling people, hey, this works. Here's what's going on in Iowa. And we were the example. And basically, I know Dr. Cooley, when he was at the forefront of all of that, he was being asked by other states, like, how are you doing this? And what do we have to do? And so we were at Title IX, quite frankly, really didn't affect Iowa at all when it was implemented, other than a lot of the big schools that weren't as sponsoring sports at that time now had to do that. Because if you look at all the records and things like that from back in the 70s and 60s and 50s, it's all rural schools. There's not a lot of, you don't really have that, those big Cedar Rapids schools. You won't see Marshalltown and any schools that size that were involved in athletics at that time until they had to in 72.
And that's the other thing, because you mentioned Dr. Cooley. You go to your offices in West Des Moines, and you're really walking into having to carry a legacy of the people before you that really championed and built up girls' sports in this state.
Absolutely. I think there is set the standard, and his rule of thumb was always he wanted the Iowa girl to stand as tall as their male counterparts, and is in Dr. Cooley's words, not any bigger, just same. And so that legacy it is always in the back of our heads, I think, when we do our tournaments. And we've always had the philosophy of putting on great tournaments, because for many kids, many high school girls especially, that this is the pinnacle of their athletic experience, because a lot of them don't go on to play collegiate sports or athletics. This is we want to make sure that is the standard, and giving them an experience that they will never forget.
So 30 years at the girls' union, you've seen a lot of changes. You've seen the mound change in softball. You've seen the start and the just exploding popularity of girls wrestling. There's been a lot of things happen in your 3 decades there.
Yep, there has. We've added soccer, and we've added wrestling, bowling. Those are sports that we didn't have when I first started. So they started, but when you've seen the explosion of women's sports, it, again, maybe not to the extent that maybe some of the other states in the nation have, just because girls athletics has been such a big deal in our state for such a long time. But yeah, we have seen a ton of things, from everything from when I started, it wasn't rally scoring volleyball. It was side out volleyball, which was one of the longest, really boring sports until we went to rally scoring, and now it's our most popular sport. So yeah, a lot of different changes, and all of them have been pretty good.
Just those days of you had to score on offense in volleyball.
Yep.
And you got 2 average teams playing a 5-setter, and it would just be the longest match of your life.
It was being in a dentist chair, no question about it.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. What do you think about the explosion of girls wrestling? Obviously, this is a wrestling state, but what you just saw a few months ago, 5,000 people down there in Coralville, it's just going crazy.
It is really going crazy. There's always the newness effect, where something new for people to try. And I think it is, obviously, like you said, Iowa is a great state for wrestling. They love wrestling. And I think even we've been surprised since starting it, the growth and just the popularity of it, and the sellout crowds, and at our venue for state. And it's been a good change. We're seeing a lot of girls that maybe we didn't see in other sports that are giving this a try and doing well with it. And it's exciting. And I'll be honest, I haven't been a huge wrestling fan growing up, but you get to see the girls work, and how hard they work, and how disciplined they are when they do this. And you get to see them perform at state. It really is fun to watch. And it is really, it's remarkable to see how well that they do and how skilled they are.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing you're heavily involved in, Iowa is the only state with a combined boys and girls state track meet, and it has become a giant thing that attracts what now? It's like about 70,000 people roughly over the
Yep,
course of the weekend. It's a huge endeavor. You've got one of the great track PA announcers probably in history, certainly active,
absolutely.
and that is a huge endeavor in Des Moines every year.
It really is. In a lot of ways, it is our crown jewel. Probably both the boys and the girls would tell you that, as far as just the amount of stuff that goes on and the just the excitement, the crowds and the events. The kids really just put on a great show. And then, like you said, you've got Mike J, who just takes those kids on to another level of performance. You can't imagine a PA announcer really making a kid run even faster and things like that. But Mike does that. He really put in their PRs when he's on the mic, and it's a lot of work to put that together, but it is a lot of fun, and it is actually the largest high school track meet in the United States. Yeah, largest high school track meet in the United States, and a lot of moving parts, but we've been doing it now for a little over 20 years. I think 2005 was our first co-ed meet, I believe. So we're right on, I think this is year 21 of having the co-ed meet, and it's been one of the best things we've ever done by far.
It's interesting because the track and field together just seems like a no-brainer, even though no one else in the country is doing it. It's just such a great spectacle. But we're also getting to a point which started many years ago, but we're starting to separate out some girls and boys championships because we want the girls to feel like their championship matters. I know it's been that way in basketball for a long time, but you're separating out bowling because the girls were feeling like a JV competitor in their own meets. And so just a little change in time to just showcase the girls bowlers first, the boys bowlers second.
That was a good move for lots of different reasons. One, now you can actually bowling is, first of all, it's one of my favorite sports because the athletes and the bowlers that compete in them, the sportsmanship that those kids display is far and away, it's the model, quite frankly, of how kids should be in sporting events, and just very supportive of one another. And it's really fun to watch that. But I mean, it's not really made for as a spectator sport because the alleys, there's not a lot of room. And when we were having both of them together, it was very crowded. You always had to worry about whether you were going to exceed the fire code limits. And we've come awfully close a couple times. So it gives the fans a much better viewing experience going to separate, but it also is good for the kids too. I think it puts them in the spotlight, which is what we want. And it really worked well this year. I think everybody was very happy that we got our own date.
Yeah, I think anybody who's never been to the state bowling meet at Cadillac XBC over in Waterloo, obviously bowling alleys aren't giant when it comes to spectator parts, but it's packed. It's full. Yeah. It's hard to get through there. The excitement is unreal. The cheers, the chants from the other students that come there, from the parents. And then, yeah, the kids all know one another from the amateur bowling circuit.
Absolutely. Yep.
So they're competing, but they're also pulling for one another.
Absolutely. I love it when we've had kids that get on a roll and they're like, you've got a potential 300 game. Everybody cheers them on. There's no one that's really rooting for anybody to fail out there. And I just love that because you see so many different, obviously in some of our other sports where you have the missed free throw and the air ball with all the chants that go with it. You don't really see that in bowling. And I hope it stays that way. I really do. But it is just a really good show for the kids.
Another big change coming, softball. You're expanding, getting more fields up at that fantastic facility in Fort Dodge and expanding the way that plays out.
We're going to a double elimination tournament. That'll be really fun. Fort Dodge has been our partner for over 50 years. I think this will be year 55 we've been at Rogers Park in Fort Dodge. And the community of Fort Dodge does such a great job of really working with us and really making changes and pouring a lot of the money that they get from being a host back into the park. So this year they've built 2 more fields for us. All 5 fields now have Musco lighting on them. So that basically gives us the avenue to play 5 classes of double elimination tournament. We're going to put each class will have their own field. We'll have 4 games on the first round. Then we'll go to 5 games on day 2. And then depending on how things shake out with the double elimination, we'll have anywhere from 3 to 5 on Wednesday. And then Thursday, we'll have 2 classes of state championships. And then Friday, we'll have our three other classes. So I'm really looking forward to having every game's going to mean a lot, as opposed to maybe when you had those consolation games, you had people dragging their way into the field because the consolation, it is what it is. But this thing, everybody's got a chance now. They can afford to maybe make a mistake and come back and fight again another day, which will be a lot of fun.
So what's next on the agenda for the girls union, or what's next for you personally? What do you want to see happen? And you're not close to retirement, but not super close. There's other things you can still achieve. What would those be?
I think the big thing for us coming up next year is our 100th anniversary as a organization. So we were founded in 1927, and so we are making preparations for a 100th year anniversary for the Girls Athletic Union. I think we really want to showcase that, just put on display the different things, the awesome things that have been happening throughout the years, whether it's 105 years of basketball tournaments to celebrating all of our sports and all of our athletes. And we've done some neat things that I really think has been very good the last couple of years. One is we've established the Iowa Girl Foundation, which is another thing that we'll use to raise money for more scholarship opportunities for girls, more programming in regards to whether it's mental health or team building, things like that will come through the foundation. And I think then there's the other part of as far as the education piece with whether it's with officials or whether it's with kids. So there's a lot of different things. There's a lot of things out there as far as athletics right now, and especially high school. You see some of the things in college that might mirror their way back to us, whether it's NIL is something maybe you don't think of high school kids getting endorsement deals, but it's something that could possibly happen in the next few years. And then there's always challenges with whether it's open enrollments, contact periods, and with coaches working with kids, different things like that. And the other part is, too, our participation numbers. I know you've done some stories about that with basketball, and there's a lot of different things that we're trying to look into to see what we can do to make kids want to still play, not just one sport, but multiple sports, and trying to work with clubs and things like that to try to make the one thing you hear from kids nowadays is we're wiped out, we're burned out, and it's not necessarily from playing multiple sports. You have kids that are playing two sports that are burned out because they've got all that club stuff in the background that they have to keep themselves busy with, and they feel like they have to do in order to keep playing. And those are things that challenges and stuff that we're looking at, and not any real easy quick fixes with that. But again, things that we look at and try to find alternative ways to make things work best for kids.
Along those lines, I know you have the student advisory committee, and I've gotten to know Kia Oliveira a little bit over the last couple of years, the great Waterloo West cross country track and field basketball star. I know she's been a part of that. What do those student athletes bring to the table to help you navigate these ever changing times?
I think the biggest thing they bring to us is perspective. I really think asking them, what is on your plate? What keeps you up at night as far as what you have to do, as far as in regards to your schoolwork, to what you've got to do mental health wise to keep your head above water. I think, and that's one of the things to me anyway, that these kids are rock stars, all of them that are on these committees, on our SAC committee. They're just fantastic kids, and they bring a lot of perspective and help us think about things that maybe we aren't thinking about. And sometimes we tend to look at things and try to fix things in return, not intentionally trying to be asking our ADs what works best. Maybe we should be asking the kids what works best for you. What do you want to see? Where do you want to see a second break if we need to put in another family week within our schedules and things like that? Where are you seeing it really bind up, and what's keeping you from, or what's wearing you out as far as your activities, and where you need the break at?
It's such a tough challenge, too, because you and I have talked about this extensively. What's good for 5A isn't necessarily what's good for 1A, and what's good in Grundy Center may not be what's good in Waukee. Tough state with all the rural communities and these pockets of cities that have different agendas.
Well, that all depends on where you're at, too. If you're a small school in Southern Iowa, if you're going to play for a club team, you're going to have to travel, or to get extra instructions, lessons, or whatever, you're probably going to have to travel an hour to 90 minutes to get that, as opposed to in Grundy Center, where you have a pretty quick trip to Waterloo or Cedar Falls if you wanted to do that. So there's lots of different challenges, and sometimes all things aren't equal for when it comes to high school athletics, that's for sure. And there's certain things we can do about that, and there's certain things we can't really do much about. As long as we try to stay on top of things, I think that helps.
Before I let you go, because I've known you since we were little kids, one of the great album collectors I've ever known. You are, and you have been your entire life. What's the greatest LP you own?
Beatles' White Album. You don't even have to think hard about it.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
All right. I think anybody that knows me, that knows my collection, knows that I've got about 6 or 7 different variations and versions of that album. That is the gospel according to John, Paul, George, and Ringo.
And you're younger than I am, but you're the guy who turned me on to the Beatles, because I wasn't listening to the Beatles, and I was more of almost a disco into the 80s pop stuff. But you're the guy who introduced me to the Beatles. I knew you were going to say the White Album. How big is your collection now?
It is, I would say, right around 1,100 albums, probably.
Wow.
I mean, and the CDs maybe a little probably a few more than that too. I'm getting in the process of replacing the CDs with the vinyl, but yeah, it's a dangerous hobby for sure.
It is. But it's, you know what? It's in 2026, it's so unique. There's a lot of people who say I used to collect baseball cards, but there's not near as many who say I've collected albums. I've collected
Yeah.
LPs my entire life. And I was that way when we were both young growing up here at Grundy Center. I was that way with 45s, but not so much albums.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I have a few albums now, but I'm just envious of how you've stayed after that all these years and collected all this fantastic music.
It's a dangerous hobby. My wife, I think, would really. What did she tell me one time? She goes, "I think things grow in here, and it's not organically." And I'm like, maybe a little, but yeah. But it's fun for me. It's the hunt. I always like to. There's nothing better than when you're just thumbing across stuff and you come across something you really love, and it's, oh man, that is awesome. I don't like to order things. I like to try to see if I can find them. To me, that's the best part.
I was going to challenge you and say Hotel California, but I knew you were going to say Beatles and White Album, so I didn't even bring it up.
Hotels, it's probably in the top 50 for sure. But I actually, you know what, I'll be honest, I think I'm probably one of the weird ones that like the long run better than Hotel California, but
Yeah.
that's just me.
They had 7 albums in a row go platinum. They didn't
Yeah,
have
I think they all
album.
did. I'm pretty sure they all did. They are all good. They are all excellent albums, no question.
Yeah. Yes, I always appreciate talking to you. I know I call you.
Oh, it's awesome. I'm so glad you're back in Iowa. I'm so glad
thanks
you're
so
back
much,
in Iowa.
yes.
All
You
right,
are the
take
best,
care.
and good luck living at the Union. You guys are doing great work down there.
Appreciate that very much.
All right, thanks,
Chad.
guys. Take care. Special thanks, Jason Eslinger. So good to have him on the show talking about girls' high school sports. I hope you enjoyed it because I loved it. S and I, when we get together, we talk sports just nonstop, or Grundy Center just nonstop. We always have a good time. So great to have him on, and so glad to have you part of the Sports Guys Iowa Network and checking out the Chad Harberts Show. Share it with your friends. Let people know what's out there. The podcast network is growing. The Chad Harberts Show is growing, and we've got great things planned for you still this year, and even bigger things planned coming up this fall. So make sure you subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. Make sure you're bookmarking that on Spotify or the Apple Podcast, because the Sports Guys Iowa Network is going places. We want to make sure you come along for the ride. Have a great one, everyone, and we'll talk to you next week right here on the Chad Harberts Show.